right, everybody, how you doing for a Monday night? Another big weekend by the Warriors. They're on a roll, 6 in a row now. As you saw, we're going to do the second in our series of former broadcasters tonight. I'm going to bring in Henry Haderlein. If you listen to the morning show and on Kiss F 104.7 Kiss FM, he goes by Dan Henry. He's a man of many names. Let's introduce Henry Haderlein, bring him in. Henry, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. It's been a long time since we talked to each other here and there. Just for some background, Henry and I went to school together in high school. That's a long time ago.
That's right. Yeah, many moons ago, but we always talked hockey back then. I know you were a big Leaf fan, and I was
It's hard being a Leaf fan right now.
Yeah, that's true, I guess, right? But I don't get to watch as much hockey as I once did, unfortunately, but I'm pretty busy, but we'll get into that.
Okay. First, I'm going to start with a recap of the weekend. We'll get into that right away. Friday night, St. Thomas Stars coming to town. A good team there. They're 19 rookies, so play very hard. Stratford with the 7-5 win. Quinn Kiffer scored. Jonas Schmidt with the 2 goals. Joe Curtin, another goal again Friday night, sorry. Jonas Schmidt, the Generals 3 stars. Jonas Schmidt. Will Coward, his first GOHL goal. I'm going to play that one. And Quinn Kiffer was the 3rd star. Let's bring up the Will Coward goal. This is his first goal of his career in the GOHL.
Menard now out. He'll take this one. Waiting for the linesman, drops it in. St. Thomas player stopped. It comes right back to the Wildfong. Wildfong over to Coward. Coward, a shot, scored! Will Coward from the point. McDonald didn't see it at all. Picked the far corner. Stratford with a 2-1 lead here in the first period and a power play goal to boot.
That's a pretty big. Yeah, there were 4 seconds into that power play. So you can't complain about that very much. All right. So that was Friday night's game. Then Sunday, a rare afternoon game down at the Alm in a 4:30 start. Some people saw my post. I had a 4:30 start, and then down at the bottom, I had a 7:30 start. I was confused at when it started, but we'll get used to that. Sunday's game was a fabulous hockey game between these two teams. Strathroy, the Rockets, and Stratford both coming in with 5-0 records, 5-game win streaks coming into this game. Stratford put Joe Curtin with the first goal. They were up 3-1. Max Wildfong scored. We were up 2-1 into the third. Strathroy was able to tie it there, and then we went to overtime. And this is what happened in overtime.
Against Ritson. Schmidt's going to win that cleanly. High and up off the boards. That's going to spring Wildfong. Wildfong going to get around his man. Going to go in. Score! Max Wildfong! He's going to win it. What a play.
So there you have it. A big overtime goal for Max Wildfong. As he said, he had 2 goals. Sitting right now in second spot and scoring on the team. Jonas Schmidt leads the team with 18 points. Wildfong right behind him. So the 3 stars for the week. I went with Will Coward as the number 1 star just because of the fact that his first GOHL goal had a goal and 3 assists. Max Wildfong with the OT winner, 2 goals and assists. And Jonas Schmidt with the big weekend, 5 points, 2 goals, and 3 assists. Jonas Schmidt is on a tear right now for these Warriors, and it's good to see. Both well-played games, and it'll be coming down every game. All these 2 points are important. We're in 5th place now, 1 ahead of Waterloo. They won again. Lots of things happening. Our next game's coming up. There you see it. Waterloo comes to town Friday night. That's a big rivalry game. Puck drop at 7:30. General and I on the air at 7:25. And then Sunday, November 30th, we travel to Pelham to play the Panthers. That's a 2:45 game time. So if you're looking to tune in, remember 2:45. You tune in 4:30 or 7:30, you probably missed the game. You can catch the highlight maybe on Flow or something. But if you've tuned in that late, I'm sorry you missed it. So like I said, another great win. The Warriors are on a 6-game win streak. Other big news in the GOJHL, Henry. We have the Cambridge Redhawks currently right now on a 23-0 start to the season.
Oh my God, really?
Yes. So they play in St. Mary's on a crossover game this Friday night. They can tie the record for most consecutive wins to start a season. against that Caledonia Coverts have. And if they win that game, they go home Saturday night for a chance to tie the record set by the Kitchener Dutchmen in 2013 at 25 games, most consecutive wins. That record by the Dutchmen was set in the Alman Arena. When the Dutchmen set that record, they made a point of it to celebrate very heavily and hard because Stratford had a 22 game record, I think, that the Dutchmen ended up beating around there. So when they set that record, they celebrated overly hard in front of the Stratford crowd. And I remember this because the next game in Kitchener was a total gong show.
Oh, is that right?
Penalty parade and everything. And another big thing in the go. Sarnia still has not won this year. They are 0-23. 0-3. So the question was, we were posing on the weekend, was which ends first, the losing streak or the winning streak?
Yeah, good question.
I'm going to have to say it might be the winning streak just because of the fact teams are going to be gunning to beat Cambridge.
Yeah, you would think so. It's funny because, those winning streaks, like Kitchener had that streak and they got the game in Stratford, but did they win league that year? I don't even remember that.
I think they ended up winning the league that year. I'd have to check.
Yeah.
But Jason Clark has a great saying, and I love it. It's this: he would rather be the hunted. He'd rather be the hunter than the hunted.
Yeah, that's a good place to be, right? Yeah.
Like we're sitting in fifth spot, but we still have a lot of games at hands on the team in front of us. Our win percentage is .765, which is third in the league, but we're sitting in fifth, but we're still 3 games behind most teams for games played.
Gotcha.
The top team, Chatham, is 5 games ahead of us. So if we had 5 wins, we'd be tied with them for the league lead. So we're going to make up those games come December. Guys, busy December, busy January. That is our own doing. We've talked about it. We took the week off for the OHL game in Stratford, and then they took a weekend off for the trip to Bowling Green as a team building.
Gotcha.
So that's the way it is. All right, let's get to Henry Haderlein now. Henry, voice of the Stratford Culletons at the time.
That's
from
right.
2000 to 2005, and you were able to work with the legendary Bob Smith.
Yeah, Bob. I approached Bob, and he was working with Clark, obviously, into the early 90s before I think Lee Griffey became his main sidekick. And I think the radio station was largely behind that they wanted at least somebody on staff to be working with Bob on a regular basis. But I talked to Bob after I put the True Champions audio series together, and I had finished college and I was working in Kitchener in radio, and just kind of had an interest because I had saw that he was bringing in a few new faces, and I said, hey, something I might be interested in trying. And he said, well, let's work you in on a few games. So the way that he did it then, his health, of course, over the few years that I worked with him, progressed. He had disease essentially. And the more and more that progressed, the more we, whether it was Catherine, McGee, myself, or even Lee, would take over calling the games, and he would interject basically his color here and there. That's kind of how that progressed.
Yeah. You also said you worked with the General. I work with the General.
Yeah.
The General's been around for a long time.
Yeah. And Don's a great guy to work with. He, of course, because he's been around the team, he knows every player that's gone through there, and typically personally, right? Because not only did he billet, players along the way, but he's around the organization all the time. So it was a pleasure to work with him. I mean, we did Sutherland Cup games together. I can remember one. We were in Thorold. Have you been to Thorold? Do you know that barn?
I've been to Thorold. I've been in that barn. The old barn, yep. Yeah.
So the first year we were able to get up into the gondola. It was really tight. The second year they didn't let us up there. So we were literally calling games from the stands with fans basically sitting on top of us.
Yeah.
And Stratford had a good run that second year against Thorold. I think we won both games in Thorold that year. It was a little unexpected, but and it was what was the guy's name? I'm just trying to think of him now. Andrew Carey, is that who it was? Yeah, he scored a number of big goals for Stratford in that final.
I was doing a little research. Like you had the 2 Sutherland Cup back-to-back years. Kendrick Nicholson was the captain of the one team.
That's
Travis
right.
Hofstetter, the
Yep.
captain of the next team. But
That's
you had
right.
players on there like Jordan Lang and Kyle Casey and all these guys. Devin Didiomidi was on the second team.
Yeah.
It was a very well played team. The only thing is the second year, who was the starting goaltender? Do you remember? Because the only one they have listed on their pitcher is Lance Scott. And I'm trying to think back. I think he was the starter that year.
That's a great question. I have to go back through my notes, and they're in a box in my garage. I do have them, but it was Ryan McDonald the first year, right?
Yes, Ryan McDonald the first year. Yeah. He set the record that year for most shutouts in a season.
There was a season that Craig Lizen came in from Waterloo.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the following year, though. Who the heck was in goal as well in there?
I actually think it was just Lance Scott. I think he was the.
You might be correct on that one.
Yeah, he's the only goaltender listed in the team photo. So I'm thinking that's him, but I'll ask the general Friday night. He'll know.
He'll probably remember. Yeah.
So what were some of your big? Obviously the two Southern Cups. What are some of your highlights that you remember of those series?
In the first season, the Culletons brought in. Trying to remember, was it Scott Morris? Steve Morris. I don't remember. He had played with the team maybe a year or two earlier. He was going to university, and they kind of needed a player to just kind of get them over the hump. As far as winning league, that wasn't going to be a huge problem. But the Thorold group that first year, if I remember correctly, they had two of their key people out. They had this line: Bill Zalba, Martin Bentivoglio, and Chris Reese. And I think two of those guys, I'm trying to remember which of the three were out and which one played, and one of them came back for game 7. But just needed a few bigger guys up front, and he was one that I remember them bringing in. But you're right, you mentioned Jordan Lang, there was Shane Stewart, and just so many great players that they brought in. But that 7th game was so tight. You were probably in the arena.
Oh, I was in the arena for that 7th game. I remember that.
From my feeling, that was the first time in a long time that I ever felt like the arena was so full you couldn't fit more people in.
Yeah.
The time before that I remember, because I remember vividly the 94-95 group winning, because I was in St. Thomas when that happened. But in 1990-91, in that 7-game Waterloo series, I was living in Peterborough at the time, but I came back on a Friday night and I watched it. Jamie Hartnett was the captain. That place was off the rafters that night as well, because of course, that was the heyday, right?
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't think in that building. Do you remember those days when they brought the shakers and they had corn inside these
the
bottles?
Tide bottles? The Tide bottles.
You honest to God, you couldn't think. It was just so freaking loud in that building. I'm thankful that they don't do that anymore. But nonetheless, So that 7th game, I can remember as the time was ticking down, and it was like a 2-1 or a 3-2 game. I think it was 2-1, and Steve Morris was actually going down the ice with the puck into an empty net and was going to score a goal, but I don't think it went in time. But I remember running downstairs, just cheering because I wanted to get down on the ice and talk to the players. We let them put a microphone down from the gondola where you sit now.
Yep.
The technology was a little different. We didn't have all the wireless technology yet, but I got to talk to players on the ice. It was just kind of a neat moment, and people stuck around that building for a long time. And I'm trying to remember if it was that season or the season after, because strangely enough, leading into those back-to-backs, the Culletons typically won that championship on the road. I think it was the first one they won at home, and then after that, they would win on the road. Streetsville, St. Catharines, St. Thomas. But these two, they actually won in Stratford, which was great because that cup, and it was a brand new cup at the time, actually went into the Avon River after one of those games.
Yeah.
The players took it in.
Yeah, I remember those stories. And being a local boy, you were around for a lot of the glory years here in town when the big players come through, the Ed Olchucks, the Chris Prongers, those guys. That 95-96 team with Eric Anderson, Colin Schmidt, and Dennis Williams setting all those records.
Yeah.
We're sort of spoiled here as youngsters when we were in high school, grade school, or whatnot, right?
We very much were, and lucky I got into photography in the mid '90s too, and I was just finishing up high school and going off to university and college. I actually got quite a few pictures of that '94, '95 team, and don't know if you knew this, but Jeff Zaire, he's here in Woodstock now. That's where I live now, by the way.
Yep.
And I've been here for 20 years, but I bumped into Jeff at a remote, and I told him that I had some pictures of him from '94, '95 that I don't think he had probably ever seen before, of him on the ice in St. Thomas holding the Sutherland Cup. There was a picture with him and Greg Fullerton at the change room downstairs after the game. There was a picture with Boyd Devereaux and him, and I think Daryl Green and Joe Jeff Dunbar were all in one shot together holding the cup after the game. I think Boyd Devereaux, just to kind of show the boyish way he played hockey, he had like a lollipop in his mouth after that. That's just the kind of player. And I remember talking to Dennis Flanagan about him when I put the Champions series together. That Boyd just played with a lot of boyish type features. And I think even when you saw him in the NHL, and of course he ended up winning the Stanley Cup in Detroit, he still played with that sort of boyhood love for the game. It's just everything that happened on that ice that was good, he loved. And it was so much fun to get a chance to see them play.
Yeah, Stratford, like the William Allman Arena being just over 100 years old now, is a special place to watch hockey, is it not?
I mean, I always stood in awe, and I would talk, you can ask the general about this too, just to, the sight lines. I think you and your co-host have mentioned this, or you and Don, when you look over the ice, you can practically see every part of the ice. I don't know what other building that happens, certainly not in our league. And I don't know some of the new buildings, but at that time, you could see virtually everything because you're right on top of it. But the majesty of the, the way the facade is and the way that the roof is, it just gives that aura of hockey, and it leads you back to that. And I know there's pictures in the lobby of the Eric Lindros commercial. I remember my boss in Kitchener, who's from out west, he came to Stratford because they used to do an antique show over the August long weekend. Whether they still do, I don't know. But that was his first time walking into the arena. And when he got back to the office on Monday, he said, "Oh my God, I can't believe when you walk in there, it just exudes hockey. It just has this feel to it." And I think, and I hope people in Stratford understand how lucky they are to have that arena and the fact that it's been kept in good working order for all these years, because it is truly a wonder.
Yeah, it is a treat to call a game from. I tell people you don't know how lucky you are till you go to another arena. We go down to LaSalle. We go down to LaSalle and we call it from the corner at ice level.
I was going to say the same thing. Bob Smith and I did a game, and I remember the game for a number of reasons, because we were at ice level in the far corner, freezing our butts off. Like, it was cold down there. Didn't care. That's what you do for hockey. And Bob, that didn't faze him anyway. But it was a night that the best player on the ice was actually a call up from the Navy vets. It was he's a firefighter here at Woodstock now, Chad Patton. He was a regular Culleton player, but then he decided to go back to Woodstock to play with his buddies, right? And I think his Greg Patton, his cousin, also played for the Culletons in that era too. But Chad, I think he had 2 goals and an assist that night. It was like a 5-2 win. And I said to Dennis Flanagan at the time, I said, "Have we ever played here before?" This was the Victoria Road Arena. I don't know. Not even sure. Does Guelph even have a team in the league now? Or
no, they don't. No,
that's what I thought. But this was Victoria Road Arena. I had never been to that facility before. But yeah, it was kind of a rickety old barn, and they were known as the Dominators at that time. But he told me that that they had played in that arena before years ago, and that Sean Heafy had a 5-goal game or something there. So he knew all that stuff too, because of course he was there. But that was an interesting night. And one of the reasons why I remember that night is because you might remember the Tom Brady Tuck Rule game. It was that same night. I got home and that game was on, and I saw the snow and the Raiders and all this stuff. So that was the night of that game in Victoria Road Arena in Guelph.
Yeah. Like right now, the only other arena we use a gondola or press box is Elmira, the new arena there, the Dan Snyder. But the problem with that press box is to see the left side goal net, I have to lean across the counter and look under the girder. to see the net. So it's kind of funny if people are there watching from the far side, they'll see the general sitting there, and I'm literally leaning across the table, the social media girl beside me, I think their announcer actually sits on the other side of the rink, just behind the stands, because he knows better.
Oh, to get a better vantage point.
To get it, well, it's a lot better from that side. We're gonna have to see what we can do this year, but there's some weird places in Sarnia. I'm down in the corner, just up above the seats. Now, Chatham last year in the playoffs, we were right up at the back of the stands.
Okay.
And interesting enough, there we go to Chatham, who's in the crowd, but none other than Dennis Flanagan Jr., as he lives down in Chatham now. So he was there, and we were able to interview him a couple times, and he has fond memories about Stratford and being from Stratford. And, you know, he was the heart. That Flanagan family was the heart of this team for a long, long time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got to know him and Denny and Digger a little bit during my time with the now Warriors, but at that time Culletons. Just a wonderful group of people. And you probably talked to Danny Muir on your program.
I have not yet. No.
No, you should, because Danny went on all those scouting trips with those guys. That's when they went down and found Ed Olczyk. They were down there. I think they were trying to scout like Turcotte and Linden and people like that. They watched the Detroit team play. And I think it's in the documentary. You can hear it there, The True Champions, where he said, we went to watch this Detroit team play. And he said, I thought that was the best team I had ever seen play. This is Denny talking to me. And when he found out Chicago had won, he said to his buddy, well, like, how could they have won? Who did they have? And he said, they have this boy named Ed Olczyk. And he said, can you write that down for me? And that's when he started trying to pursue him to see if he would come to Stratford.
Yeah, and he came and he set a record at the time, and you know, the rest is pretty much history. He's one of those guys that were in our top 50. I don't know if you ever will see the top 50 Colton Warriors of all time last year, where we released the list, and he was one of the guys on the list.
I'll have to check that out. No, he definitely would have to be on the list. There's no question about that.
Yeah, we had John Kastner, Steve Rice, Corey Smith, currently with the Beacon Herald.
Yeah, those are
Eddie Matthews. We had all these guys, myself, Jason Clark from the team, Wendell Archer from the team. All these guys, we got together as a committee. We had 5 guys take 1 decade each, and they had to pare down. They had to give us 10 players. We got it down to 81, and then we got in a room together. We got in the lounge together one night, and we were able to chop it out in about 3 hours and get it down to 50.
Wow.
So many players, you couldn't satisfy everybody. But there was a lot of players from that 84 to 82, 83 to, 95. And then also the last 2 Sutherland Cup. There was a couple players in there because it was such a different game back then, but we had so much talent back then as well.
Yeah, there's so many names when you think about it. A name that comes to mind as well, and I don't know if this has come up, Casey Fatorik. Do you remember him playing for the Culletons? That was the second Sutherland Cup. And his dad, Rob, of course, as coach in the NHL and was part of the U.S. Olympic team back in the day. I think he had just come off coaching Boston when Casey came up to Stratford. And he was a little like, he didn't really want to talk about himself. He was there for his son, but he actually did come on with me one time when we were up at the Bayshore Center in Owen Sound. They were playing a series against the old Owen Sound Sauging Shores Grays. So I was lucky to get a chance to, at least ask him a few questions and find out a little bit about his history. But again, he was a little reluctant to do it because he didn't want to take the focus off of his kid while they were in Stratford.
Well, he was up here. Some other players like Kyle Casey was a integral part of both of those teams.
Absolutely.
That year. He played a lot of games in Stratford. He was into the top 50. It was with him. It was everybody was like, it's pretty much a no-brainer just for the amount of games played.
Games played, number of seasons played, right, and the feisty nature. He may not have been quite Dennis Williams, but he certainly was the next generation Dennis Williams, I think. Yeah. That's kind of the way I remember him. It's funny, as we talk about those years, because we often talk about, championships being the catalyst of remembering a season. But I remember some other games pretty vividly, too. This was, I want to say it was Ryan McDonald in goal as well. And the Culletons were this was the year before the first championship. So that would be 01-02. Let me think. 02-03. So this was game 7 against Cambridge. And second round, Cambridge was the 2. Let me think about this. No, I think Cambridge was the 3 seed. Stratford was the 2 because the game was in Stratford. And Griffey and I were calling the game, but I don't know if you remember this, but there was a shot, like a dump in from center ice by Cambridge, and McDonald misplayed the puck somehow. I don't know if it tipped off of something or what the heck happened, but it hit the back of the net while he was out of the net, and it's like 4-0. I made a comment on the air, and this is, just for a learning point for you, because it certainly was for me. I think the comment that I made was something to the effect of, I feel like the game is over. You get those emotions, right, when you're doing something because you're so invested in it. Mark Maui, that's a name I'm sure that you know as well. He was
Mark Maui scored. Yeah, he scored the overtime go home goal.
He's he was the captain with the Ed Olczyk team, the way I remember it. And he was on the way to the arena when he heard me say that, and he wrote a letter to the editor talking about my comment, saying, how does the broadcaster think we're out of it already? And of course, it's a lesson to learn for everybody. But, if you're a hockey coach, obviously you can't feel like you're down and not going to win 4-0. It was only 10 minutes into the first period. The Culletons got it to 4-2 before the end of that period. And I feel like it was 5-4 at the end of the second. And then literally seconds into the third period, they score again. And I feel like Stratford, they won that game. I want to say it was 7-5. So they would go on to play Elmira. Of course, they lost to Elmira. Elmira would go on to win another Sutherland Cup of their own. But that would set up the next couple of years for Stratford. But it's a game that I'll never forget for that obvious reason. I know I have the clipping. I did talk to Mark, though, afterward. We cleared it. Like, he had no animosity toward me. He just thought, we shouldn't count anybody out until we're out. It's only 10 minutes in, as bad as it feels. And I remember Roger Moorhead coming up to me afterward. It might have been a week later when we were playing Elmira, and he said, we all felt the same way too. Just to kind of soften it for me a little bit, because I felt bad about it. But he said, it's a learning point. We've all made mistakes like that.
Yeah. This being my second full year, I'm trying to get away from where I'm the fan, because sometimes it comes out. The general does it a lot too. That overtime goal, you could hear the general pipe in right away. Score because you get watching, you get fan watching, right? And I've followed this team since I was probably 5 years old. So we're going on 45 years following this franchise, this team. Last year in the playoffs, I had mentioned we were in Stratford playing Chatham, and I think we had just come back and we were going back to Chatham. And I said, just offhand, okay, we got to go back to the House of Horrors. The hostile environment in Chatham. Fans picked up on that, and I never heard the end of it when we were down there in Chatham for Game 7. I had fans saying it's really hostile here, isn't it? And I'm like, it is a hostile environment. So, but we did have extra security around us for that game. So,
did you?
There was a couple extras standing up there because.
I think Don and I only did one game in Chatham. It was a round robin game, and they wouldn't have to do the round robin anymore because of the system. But at that time, they still had the 3 leagues, and Stratford must have won that game, somehow. And I just remember the barn being really, because they talk about people setting up their blankets early. And I'm guessing
they still do that.
But I feel like we were up in a press box, though. Did they not have one there?
They do have a press box. It's just with them having to do flow and all that now. There's not enough room.
Oh, I see. I got you.
We got makes sense. Yeah. It's things have moved on, right? So for each home game, the home team has to do the flow broadcast. So they're up there, and you get some competing voices, and it would get kind of loud up in there in the press box. And
it's certainly nice
like at home.
Like when you're doing the updates there with the goals, it's nice to have the video to go alongside it, right? So
it is. And, I go on Hockey TV and I can cut out the goals I want or the plays. I usually, Will Coward, I tagged him in that this morning so he could, have a copy of his own first GOHL goal. It's a good thing to do for the kids. And
Absolutely.
a lot of the kids go back and watch the flow feeds and that, because I get comments from Jonas Schmidt. I've known his dad since high school, probably longer than that. I've known his aunt a lot further than that. And he said, I made a comment one night that he shot the puck from the corner and it went up and over the net out of play. And he comes up to me when we're just getting on the bus. He says, "No, that hit the crossbar, when I shot that puck." And I was like,
Oh.
"Well, at least you're going back to listen to it, Good to know. So they're not afraid. Guys like that are not afraid to call you out on a call.
And when you've got the evidence, it helps too, eh?
Yeah, it does. It does, because they can go back and they can pick the games up, right? And they'll get to watch it. Some other memories you have of Stratford, just coming off the top of your head.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of them. I mean, there was even before the 94-95 team, there was the Culletons were involved in a series against Guelph in the first round. And there was a face-off in the offensive zone. I don't know if remember the name John Bazio, but he I'm trying to remember. You know what? I think it was actually in the defensive zone, but he won the draw and he took that puck down ice with like seconds on the clock. There might have been 5 seconds left, and with no time left, he scores a goal, and the referee counts it. They don't even drop the puck again. That was kind of a memory that I won't forget as well. Of course, they would go on to lose. I'm trying to remember if it was Waterloo that year or if that was maybe even the year before, and it was the Kitchener Dutchmen that were still, the toast of the Midwestern League for the 2 years that they had in the 90s as well. But that's a moment that I remember quite well. We didn't have the luxury in my era of seeing as many teams, other than the fact that Stratford was good enough that they got out of league. But both years we saw Thorold. The only other team other than Chatham that we got to play, and they're not in the league anymore, was the Petrolia Jets.
Yep.
Don and I called one game down in Petrolia, and then they were eliminated. So most of our games over those 2 years out of league would have been down in Thorold. And there was a lot of really good games. There was a game as well in Thorold. Jordan Lang, I think, was being kind of roughed over by a Thorold player. This would have been the final round robin game. Stratford had already won 3. They didn't need to win this game, but I feel like they did anyway. And I called Bill Way, who was the referee at the time, an idiot on the radio for allowing certain things to go. Yeah. It was also a moment that, I talked to Eddie Matthews about it afterward. And there were people that were complaining, saying that maybe I had said something that was even a little more vulgar, if you will. I don't think that was the case, but I wish I would have chosen my words a little more gently. I certainly, respect officiating at a higher level than I probably did when I was doing the work that you were doing. I was still pretty young at the time and overtly passionate, as you and the general are as well. So, I mean, it's not an easy job to do. I can remember walking to the Almond one night, and this was long before I got into the broadcast, before I even went to broadcast school. I just somehow ended up walking with Brad Fagan into the arena, and he was there to officiate the game. And I said, wow, this is a tough barn to officiate. He said, it doesn't bother me. Like, I just have a lot of fun with it. There's another guy too that was in Stratford for his final game ever. You probably remember Bob Morley. Yep. He probably was brought in anytime that there was an important playoff game that maybe a deciding game, any sort of system, just to make sure that everything was good. But he just had a real calm sort of demeanor about the way he did things. And I was lucky enough to get a chance to interview him briefly. I didn't know that he was a firefighter outside of doing hockey, but he loved the game. He actually mentioned to me that he felt like it actually paid pretty well for what they did, going to officiate hockey, because it's something that they were pretty passionate about. But the fans didn't really faze him, because there could be a group of people, I think it was in Section B at the time, that were really tough on the referees, and maybe there's still that group that's still there. I don't know. But it didn't faze them. It didn't seem to anyway, the ones that had been around for a while.
Yeah, there was a former referee that used to come to Stratford. I knew him from college, and I knew his wife when they got married and all that. It was kind of funny because I'd get on his case and I'd be on him, and then I'd get a text message from his wife the next day. Can you leave him alone? It would just be lie. He would text me and goes, "She's just," I said, "I know she's kidding," because she'd be sitting, like, she'd come down to some of the games and I'd be just on him. No, I knew she was there and everything, and I'd talk to him after the game. It was great. He always said, you can hear it, but you really just don't. You're concentrating on other stuff going on the ice. He says,
Right.
but every now and then you get a one-liner that you pick up, and he says you're trying not to laugh, but it was, it's a great comment. He says sometimes you get great comments that come out of the stands. And
Yes.
he was always good with it. Henry, let's talk about this True Championship audio series you did way back in the day, an 11-part series. How did that come about?
So I was in college. I went to Conestoga for broadcasting school in the mid-90s, and that was a bit of a journey in and of itself. I was always interested in broadcast, but didn't think that I had the, sort of the courage to do it. I interview a lot of students today. Sorry, my phone's ringing. I'm just going to hang up on that. I interview a lot of students today that do theater and things like that, and they're very expressive things that they do. And I say, that's great for you to do. When I was in high school, I couldn't have done that. I was very shy, very quiet, very reserved. But I went to broadcasting school. I met up with some great people, Dan Fisher, who people around Stratford area, if you're old enough, you might remember CFCA. He was a disc jockey there. And he was one of the people that took me under his wing. And that's the reason why I use the first name Dan, is in honor of Dan Fisher, who is now passed on. But when in college, they asked you to do long form features, if you will. Yep. And that was one of them that I chose because obviously I was very passionate about it, if you listen to the series. So I got to work on it. And I interviewed no less than certainly Bob Smith and Clark Heyman. But further than that, Denny Flanagan and Dennis Flanagan Jr. One of the more interesting ones that I got to interview, if you ever get a chance to talk to him, I think he's a school teacher now, is Mike McLeod.
Yes, I've actually interviewed Mike McLeod many a times.
Yeah, Mike's a great guy.
Because he has the goal, right?
That's right. He was passionate about that too, and he actually had it on video from. Yeah. Was it CKNX or CFPL came to town, and they had a camera in the building, and he showed me that goal because I hadn't seen it. I want to say I was off at college at that time, but nonetheless, he showed me that goal, which is kind of neat. It's like a goal that goes down in folklore in color history, right?
It does.
Because double overtime against Chatham. And then they go on to play, it becomes very anticlimactic after that because St. Catharines doesn't really put up a fight at all. So that 7-game series,
it's interesting you bring up that goal. So last year when we were doing the 100th anniversary of the William Elmer Arena, my other podcast before this one, the Armchair Chirpers, we did a special on the Allman Arena, and we had Mike McLeod on there because we had done a survey, and 95% of the people that answered the survey, that was the biggest goal they ever saw in Stratford, was the McLeod goal. The other goal that got some traction was the Mark Maui goal back in the day when he scored to get the game to go to overtime. Everybody had left already the arena because there was under a minute left and they were losing, and he scored with like 13 seconds left or something, tie the game. They go to overtime and win the game.
Interesting that you mentioned that people had left the arena. I'm remembering a game now. This was when the Dutchmen had won Sutherland Cup in 92 over Milton, and they were still really good in 93. They won the league, but I think they lost to the Barrie Colts before they moved on to Tier 2 and eventually to become an OHL franchise. There was a game, my buddy Dwayne and I were there, and his brother Trevor, and it was a playoff game. You know what it was? It was on Good Friday. And I remember this. I've got a couple of clippings in one of my scrapbooks on it too, that it got really scrappy. I know Matt McLeod. You remember Matt? And that's Mike's brother. Yeah. Anyway,
his son Beckham plays for the Warriors now.
I remember him challenging the Kitchener bench toward the end of the game with the Culletons up 5-2, and there was a lot of stuff going on the ice. There were actually a few Kitchener players that ended up in the stands.
Yeah, I remember that.
The referee, his name was either Forrest or DeForest. I just can't remember exactly.
It was DeForest.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if you remember this, but there was only like $1:10 left in the game, and he ran the clock. So people started walking out figuring the game was over. But this was genius on his part because he wanted to soothe things down. He wanted players to go to the dressing room, quiet down. And then he said, as best as you can, assemble a line to come out, and we're going to finish this game, even though there's almost nobody left. And half of the players didn't even have a jersey on. It was one of those kind of iconic moments that you felt kind of nervous at the moment. For what was going on, but there was enough staff and off-duty police officers that were able to keep that contained from getting out of hand, if you will. But it's just a moment that I remember as one of my folklores of hockey history.
Yeah, because it's kind of funny. Like I was going to say, Matt McLeod's youngest boy, Beckham, now plays for the Warriors. He's a defenseman. His other boy, Malcolm, was the captain for the Warriors a few years ago, and Matt and Mike played. So it was kind of funny when Beckham came up last year. I said on the air, I said, Beckham McLeod suiting up for his first game. I said, yes, that is the younger brother of Malcolm, son of Matt, nephew of Mike. So you had the four McLeods. So other in this series, you go through a lot of years and a big it just evolved, and I tell a lot of people go listen to it because it's still an iconic series that you did. And it's still on the website and everything. And
it's funny that you talk about the series because again, it was a labor of love. And Catherine McGee, have you had a chance to talk to her at all?
No, I have not yet. No.
I haven't been able to get a hold of her or find her in years either. So if you do get a hold of her, let me know because I'd certainly like to chat with her.
Yeah, Lee Griffey will come up in the next couple of weeks, I think. So
interesting that Lee lives here in town now too. I've only bumped into him once since he moved here. He's managing editor of the local, the smaller paper here, the Echo, I think they call it. But nonetheless, in everybody that I talked to, and John Kastner, you mentioned him, and I saw his big announcement recently on being part of Hockey Canada.
Yeah,
and
congratulations, John Kastner.
Yeah,
that's huge.
It's huge, and that's great for Hockey Canada, to be honest, because they've got a wonderful person there. But even some of the other players, like Bryn Gladding, I had never met before. Neat guy. He's a photographer. He doesn't seem like the the type of player that would be an enforcer like he was. But he even mentioned to me, he said, because it was Clark Heyman said, if Bryn lined you up, you're getting hit hard. And Bryn said, I still like to do it. That was his comment when I interviewed him in the 90s for that series. So I think a lot of those things that you get when you're in your youth, if you like to be, the type of guy that scores goals, that's what you like to do. But if you're an enforcer, you like to be that person as well. But that doesn't mean like he wasn't a fighter. He was just a guy that liked to put the body check on people, right? Who else did I talk to with that series? I'm just trying to remember back to it now. There were some fans that I had involved in it, and the thing about True Champions, I split it up into what was it, 11 parts? I think
11 parts.
Yeah, I did that for Bob because he wanted to run it during intermissions of Culleton games back in that era. Whatever year I got it to him, I don't remember. He gave me a little bit of money for it. And then I said to the Culletons, if you'd like to use it in any way, feel free to do so. It was actually originally like a 60-minute one-piece documentary, and it might have been even longer than 60 minutes. And I probably have it on a cassette tape somewhere in the garage. But the part that nobody knows about is I actually did a second part to it that I never released publicly. So the True Champions focused largely, and I remember Ross Yancey was a part of this too, because I was trying to date back to the years that he was, part of the Sutherland Cup champions, and reminisce about some of those players that in some of those teams, because I remember, they played Wayne Gretzky, and when Gretzky was at Seneca, and that's a part of that documentary too. But I did another season or another series on it, and it was a 1-hour documentary focusing on some of the years where the Culletons didn't win the whole championship, if you will. There's some really great stories out there. We talked a little bit about the 91 team that Jamie Hartnett was the captain on, where they lost in 7 games. And they had that Waterloo goalie that came back from playing for the Kitchener Rangers. Was it David Schill or something?
Something like that, yeah.
He stood on his head in that series in the 7th game. And, the Culletons had Rem Murray and Chris Pronger and Greg DeVries, and the list goes on. But, I think Rem Murray had a broken jaw in that series. I mean, if he would have been healthy, they may have won that whole thing. There were so many other great little stories outside of just the teams that actually won championships. And I'm guarantee you there's probably 100 more great stories that have happened since they won their last championship. Just because you don't win, that doesn't define who you are. I think we remember Ed Olczyk, and we remember that team for being, I think Bob or maybe Clark coined them, the cardiac Culletons. John Kastner mentioned to me that Ed Olczyk would play entire shifts on defense because they just didn't have anybody left. That's the last line of defense they had.
Yeah. And one of the parts of your series it's called the rivalry which chronicles the big rivalry between Stratford and Waterloo, which is still a rivalry now.
Yep.
Completely different teams, but they come to the barn Friday night, and there's usually always a big crowd when Waterloo comes to town.
Does Waterloo still play at the rec center?
Yeah, they play on the big Olympic ice there at the rec center.
Yeah.
You probably remember back in the day when they played the bubble across the street.
Very vaguely. I didn't go to Waterloo. Like, you
Yeah.
couldn't get in half the time, right?
Yeah.
For that. I remember going to a game with my current wife in Waterloo, and I think Ethan Rabideau was part of the broadcast team at that time. And this was one of those, it's 10, 12 years ago, when the rivalry was getting heated up again. And I went into that barn, and every seat was full. It was a Friday night. This was game 6, and I think game 7 was going to be back in Stratford on the Sunday. This is my recollection. I may be off on some of these details, but everybody from Stratford came over because it was a Friday night. That's hockey night, right? So that bar, like, you couldn't walk around the concourse. It was so friggin' tight. I bumped into him. I was trying to get to the bathroom. I said, "Have you ever seen this before?" I said, "I've never seen this before." Like in Waterloo, with every seat packed, that was friggin' crazy. So clearly, when those two teams meet, there is a little bit. I mean, Waterloo won the league that particular year. Again, I don't remember which one it was, but I try to get down and watch some playoff games when I have a chance, and that was certainly one of them that piqued my interest.
Yeah, Waterloo. So 3 years ago, Stratford beat them in 7 games to win the Cherry Cup, and eventually go on to lose in 7 games to Leamington at the time. But that 7th game was here in Stratford, and that's where I got the chills of the old days, because we were 5 rows deep standing up. There was people sitting on the stairs. You couldn't fit another body into that arena. And I'm sure if the fire marshal was around, they would have had to shut down the arena because it was packed. And it's such a great rivalry. But now, last year, they changed the lineup of the league. It went to 2 conferences.
Yep.
So the Midwest dissolved, which, we weren't happy with. We were okay with it, but a lot more travel now. But we finally got the geographical rivalry with St. Mary's. It was a rivalry that for 50 years was never there, and they're 15 minutes down the road.
I lived in St. Mary's actually from 82 to 85, and so strange that these 2 junior franchises could be so close together within a county. I mean, of course, we play Listowel too, which is also at Perth, and there's a great rivalry there. But St. Mary's,
still a huge rivalry. Yep.
St. Mary's is even closer. Like, you can bike to St. Mary's in a few hours, right? So I never really understood that. But I mean, I'll tell you one thing. When I was in school there, because it was right like grade 6, 7, 8 that I was there, people from St. Mary's despised the Culletons at that time because of the fact that they were a good hockey club. And I think they would have liked that rivalry to be able to see them play like they can now.
Yeah. So then 2 years ago, we were all Stratford was in. We had a chance to go to the Southern Cup. We had to beat Listowel. Listowel ended up beating us going to the Southern Cup, and they faced St. Mary's in the Southern Cup final.
I remember this.
So we would have had that playoff. The playoff series we're still looking for. We're looking for a Stratford St. Mary's playoff series, because I think it would be both barns would be full. When they play in the regular season, the 4 games we played last year in the regular season, they were like playoff games. Both barns were a lot of people.
Yep.
Having fun, good rivalry, but it's still that way. You don't like the Lincolns, you don't like the Coltons. One of the funniest things I remember about going to St. Mary's is we got on the bus, and one of the backup goalie was from out west, or no, up north. He was from Thunder Bay. So he came to Stratford. His parents were friends with Chris Pronger's parents.
Yes.
Or his grandparents were friends with Chris Pronger's grandparents. So he asked about coming to Stratford. They said, "Oh, if you can go to Stratford, go to Stratford." So he came. So we get on the bus, and he's got a pillow and everything. And I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, we're going on the bus trip." And I said, "Yeah, it's 15 minutes." And so it was kind of funny. I got a laugh out of him there, because he goes, he was used to 12-hour bus rides and all this, right? And you get these kids, and we're just going 15 minutes. It's good.
That's too funny.
Henry, this has been great.
It's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
It's been a lot. That True Championship series is, if you want to listen, it's still on the Warriors website. Go look under the history. It's down at the bottom. True Championship audio series, 11-part series, very well done. It's been great talking to you. Great seeing you again. maybe later in the year we might have to do this again.
Yeah.
I'm trying. I'm getting some other broadcasters, like I said, Lee Griffey. I've been in touch with him. I had Kenny Casey on, my predecessor, before me. So
Yeah,
he
that's
did
great.
it.
And if you
So
if you get a hold of Catherine, I'd love to have a chance to at least connect with her. But please say hi to Dawn for me too.
Yeah, I'll let the general. I told the general. I said Henry Haderlein's coming on the podcast, so he usually watches the podcast. He enjoys it too. I have fun with it. It's a good thing. A lot of the kids watch it too.
Very fond memories of Dawn, and I can remember us sitting out at Krabby Joe's after one of the cups. I must have been the first one. We're just sitting at a table, enjoying a beverage together with the cups sitting right there in between us. And I remember, I don't know if I was supposed to do it. I didn't really care. We were taking pictures with the cup, and I lifted that thing over my head, and I still have that picture, and I love it.
Yeah.
I hope you get an opportunity, and I feel so happy for you, Les, because I know how passionate you are about this club. That I think it's in great hands with you and Dawn taking the reins on this thing and running with it. And I wish you all the most success.
It sort of came offhanded. I had Kenny Casey on the podcast, and I said, "Boy, that's something I've always wanted to do, was do the play-by-play for a game." And he says, "Well, why don't you come down and try it?" And ended up doing it. Then he ends up taking a job up north, and here I am, second full year doing it. I'm having the time of my life doing it.
Perfect.
It's a great organization to work for. Beyond that, everybody's so helpful. But just watching the games, going to every game, getting to know the kids. It's been so much fun. Like I said, Henry, I want to thank you for doing this. We'll talk again later. Have a good night, sir.
Sounds good. Thanks, Les. Have a good night, everyone.
All right, folks. So there you have it. Henry Haderlein. What a great interview. If you get a chance, go listen to that series. It's a great series. Next game, Friday night, the longtime rivalry, Waterloo Siskins in town. Puck drop 7:30. I'll be on the air about 7:25. And then we close out November with a road trip to Pelham. We go a long distance this year. All right, folks, that's the end of it. I'll talk to you later.